Hello, my name is Jordan Porter. I'm 31 years old, living alone in a small apartment in Boise, Idaho, working as a freelance voice actor. Sounds interesting, doesn't it? Using my voice to breathe life into animated characters, commercials, or even narrating a documentary about wild birds. Ironically, while my voice may echo through thousands of headphones, car speakers, or television screens within my own family, no one has ever truly listened to me. I grew up in Twin Falls, a small town a few hours' drive from Boise where the sky is a deep blue and the fields stretch out like a serene painting. But in the Porter household, that serenity never existed. Our home was always noisy, not with laughter, but with arguments, commands, and indifference. My father, James Porter, was the owner of a well-known auto repair shop in the area. He was a tall, imposing man with a voice as deep as a truck engine and a personality as unyielding as steel. He liked to control everything, from the way we ate and studied to the way we were supposed to think. For him, achievement was everything. A B+ on my report card was enough to make him frown, shake his head, and say, "Is that all you've got, Jordan?" My mother, Autumn, was different, but no less demanding. She was the kind of woman who wanted everything to be perfect, from the clothes she wore to the image our family projected to the neighbors. She could flash a radiant smile when meeting acquaintances, but the moment the door closed, she became an unrelenting critic. "Jordan, stand up straight, don't slouch like a failure," she would say, even when I was just sitting at the dinner table. I used to think she wanted me to be the perfect version of myself she had envisioned, but I was never good enough in her eyes. Then there's my older sister, Penelope, 2 years my senior. She's pragmatic, sharp, and always knew how to please our parents. Now married with a young child, she lives in a nice house not far from Twin Falls. My younger brother, Tyler, 4 years younger than me, was the family's golden child. Tyler lived like a free spirit, carefree and reckless, never having to take responsibility for anything. Our parents always shielded him, no matter how much trouble he caused. And me? I was the middle child, the most invisible member of the Porter family. My birthdays were often forgotten, or if remembered, they were marked with a hastily bought cake and half-hearted wishes. At my high school graduation, not a single family member showed up. Dad was busy at the garage, Mom was at the spa, Penelope was out on a date, and Tyler, probably at some party. I stood in the school courtyard watching other families embrace each other while I held nothing but a diploma and an emptiness in my heart. I'm not one to complain. Really. I've learned to accept that I'm not the center of anyone's world. But sometimes, in the long nights sitting in front of my microphone voicing a courageous hero, I wonder, does anyone truly hear me? Not this voice, but me, Jordan, the real person. The answer is always a painful silence. My life in Boise is fairly simple. I work from home in a small room with an old wooden desk, a high-quality microphone, and a laptop loaded with audio editing software. This job gives me freedom, but it's also lonely. I don't have many friends. My high school friends have left Twin Falls, and I'm not great at making new ones. I enjoy my own company, but that doesn't mean I don't crave connection. It's just that I've grown used to no one really noticing me. But there's one person who always made me feel like I existed. My grandmother, Eloise. She lives on a small farm about 15 miles from my parents' house, where cornfields stretch endlessly, and a dusty red road leads to her old wooden home. At 82, with white hair and a slightly hunched back, her eyes still shine with the warmth of an autumn sun. Every time I talk to her, I feel like more than just a shadow. She listens, truly listens, to every word I say. When I was young, during summers or holidays, my parents would drive me, Penelope, and Tyler to Grandma's farm. While Penelope was glued to her phone and Tyler ran around causing mischief, I was the only one who sat with her, listening to her tell fairy tales. She spoke of brave princesses, knights who never gave up, and even dragons capable of love. I loved the way she told stories, her voice slow and warm like a lullaby. Those memories are my treasures, bright gems in a childhood full of shadows. But even Grandma, the only person who truly saw me, couldn't fill the void left by my family. I still remember my 16th birthday when the whole family went to Penelope's graduation party, leaving me behind with Grandma. She baked me a butter cookie cake, placed a tiny candle on it, and sang "Happy Birthday" in her trembling voice. I smiled, but inside I wanted to cry. "Thank you, Grandma," I said, and she just held my hand tightly. Now, as an adult, I still call her every week. We talk about everything from the weather to the old movies she loves. She always asks, "Jordan, are you okay? How's work?" And I always reply, "I'm fine, Grandma." But the truth is, I'm not fine. I'm lonely. I long for my family to see me, to hear me, even just once. But every time I return to Twin Falls, I feel like a guest in my own home. I'm not angry at them. I'm just sad. Sad because I don't know what I did wrong to be treated this way. Was I not good enough? Not successful enough? Or simply not the person they wanted me to be? I tried. I tried to excel in school, to make my parents proud, but nothing I did ever seemed enough. Eventually, I gave up. I left Twin Falls, moved to Boise, and built a life of my own. A small, quiet life, but at least it's mine. Every night when I turn off the microphone and sit alone in my apartment, I look out the window at the twinkling city lights. I wonder if my family will ever truly see me. Will they ever listen? Or will I always be Jordan Porter, the one no one hears? But then, one fateful afternoon changed everything. It was an ordinary Thursday, the kind of day where you don't expect anything beyond finishing work and waiting for the weekend. I had just wrapped up a voiceover session for a dish soap commercial. Nothing glamorous, but enough to cover rent. I was sitting in a small coffee shop in Boise, a place I frequented to edit audio because the atmosphere made me feel a little less alone. The hum of the coffee grinder, the smell of toasted bread, and the soft murmur of strangers' conversations created a strange but comforting background noise. My colleague Mia, a freelance sound editor, texted our group chat, "Hey Jordan, buy a Powerball ticket. You might just change your life." She added a goofy grinning emoji as if the whole world knew it was a joke. I smiled and shook my head. I'd never been one to believe in luck. My life, from childhood to now, had been a series of efforts and disappointments. Luck? That was for other people, not me. But that afternoon, as I passed a convenience store on my way home, I stopped. Something about Mia's joke sparked a curiosity in me. I don't know why. Maybe I was just tired of the monotony of my life. Might as well try once, I told myself, stepping inside. I randomly picked 6 numbers without much thought and spent $2 on a Powerball ticket. The cashier, an old man with a kind smile, said, "Good luck, kid." I gave a faint smile, stuffed the ticket into my pocket, and forgot about it. 3 days later, I was eating a bowl of instant noodles in my apartment, scrolling through my phone when I saw a notification about the Powerball results. I didn't think much of it, just opened it out of curiosity. The numbers appeared on the screen: 7, 14, 23, 36, 52, 61. I stared, feeling like time itself slowed down. In that moment, my heart started pounding as if it wanted to leap out of my chest. I dug the ticket out of my pocket and compared the numbers. 7th match, 14th match, 23rd match. Oh my God, they all matched. I checked again. Once, twice, 3 times. Each time my hands shook more, my breaths grew shorter. I had won. $85 million. I sank into my chair, the flimsy ticket in my hand now feeling as heavy as the world. I didn't scream, didn't jump for joy, didn't call anyone. I just sat there, silent, feeling like I'd fallen into an unreal dream. $85 million. The number was so massive I couldn't wrap my head around it. Me, Jordan Porter, the invisible middle child, the one no one listened to, was now holding a ticket that could change my entire life. But right after the initial shock, another feeling crept in: fear. I grew up in a family where money was always at the center of every argument. My father once said, "Money can buy everything except honesty." He was right. Money could buy anything, and it could also destroy everything. I thought about my family. Dad with his endless business schemes, Mom with her obsession with a perfect image, Penelope with her pragmatism, and Tyler with his never-ending debts. If they found out I'd won, what would happen? Would they love me or just my money? I decided to keep it a secret. Absolute secrecy. Not a single person, not even Grandma Eloise, could know. I didn't want my life to turn into a circus where people suddenly cared about me because of the numbers in my bank account. I needed time to think, to figure out what this money would mean for who I was. The next day, I contacted a lawyer in Boise, David Kessler, who specialized in handling large financial matters. I found him through an online review, and thankfully he was trustworthy. In his small but tidy office, I told him my story, my voice trembling as if I were confessing a crime. Mr. Kessler, with his thick glasses and reassuring smile, said, "You did the right thing by keeping it quiet. Now we need to protect this money and protect you." Under his guidance, I set up a trust called the Silverline Trust, a name I chose because it evoked a glimmer of hope, like the twinkling lights I gazed at through my window every night. I opted to claim the money anonymously, a legal option in Idaho. After taxes, I was left with about $52 million. The number was still overwhelming, almost suffocating. Mr. Kessler helped me invest a portion in safe index funds, another in real estate, and kept some in a savings account. "Keep living as you were, Jordan," he advised. "Don't let the money change you." And I did just that. I didn't buy a fancy car, move to a mansion, or throw extravagant parties. I stayed in my small apartment, kept eating instant noodles, and continued my voiceover work. But inside, I wasn't the same Jordan anymore. Every time I checked my bank account, I saw an unimaginable number, and with it a strange emptiness in my heart. The money didn't make me happier. It only made me lonelier because I knew I couldn't share this secret with anyone. 3 months had passed since the Powerball ticket changed my life. $52 million sat safely in the Silverline Trust, but it couldn't fill the void in my heart. I still called Grandma Eloise every week, listening to her talk about her small garden or the stray cat she'd been feeding. But I didn't dare mention the money. I wasn't afraid she'd change. I was afraid she'd see me differently. She was the only one who loved me for being me, not for anything else. But the longer I lived with this secret, the more I was haunted by a question. My family, who never truly saw me, what would they do if I needed them? If I didn't have $52 million, would they care? The thought clawed at me like a knife slowly piercing my chest. Then one morning, while I was in front of my microphone voicing a hero saving the world, an idea struck me. A test. A way to know the truth. I'd pretend to be in trouble. Not about money, but something life or death, like an illness. If they turned me away, I'd know where I stood in their hearts. If they helped, maybe I'd find a sliver of hope. I decided to say I had an illness requiring $5,000 for treatment. Not so much that they'd grow suspicious, but enough to test their compassion. I didn't want to call. I wanted to look them in the eyes to see their true reactions. So I planned to drive back to Twin Falls, to the house where I'd always been a shadow. That morning, the sky was cold and gray, as if the weather knew the weight in my heart. I drove my old Honda through the familiar Idaho fields. The road to Twin Falls always stirred mixed memories, joy tangled with sorrow. When I pulled up to my parents' house, my heart pounded. The house looked the same. White picket fence slightly peeling, an old apple tree in the front yard. I took a deep breath, walked up the steps, and knocked. Mom opened the door, her smile quickly turning to surprise. "Jordan, why didn't you call ahead?" Her tone carried a hint of reproach, but she hugged me, a quick, shallow embrace. Dad was in the living room watching a football game on TV. He looked up, nodded. "Been a while," he said, then turned back to the screen. No questions, no warmth. I sat on the couch feeling like a stranger in my own home. After some small talk about the weather and work, I gathered my courage. "Mom, Dad, I need to tell you something." I let my voice tremble as if holding back emotion. I went to the doctor. They found a health issue. It's not too serious, but I need $5,000 for treatment. I don't have the money. Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence like the calm before a storm. Mom looked at me, her brows furrowing. "What kind of illness, Jordan?" she asked, but her tone wasn't concern. It was skepticism. I repeated the story I'd rehearsed about an endocrine issue requiring minor surgery. I tried to make it sound real, but not so severe they'd probe further. Dad set the remote down, looking at me for the first time since I'd arrived. "Jordan, you're 31. A man's gotta handle his own problems. We're not a bank." His voice was cold, as if I'd asked for money to buy a toy. Mom nodded, adding, "You know, Tyler's in a tough spot. He needs money to pay off debts, and we're trying to help him. You can manage, can't you?" My heart felt like it was being crushed. I hadn't expected them to hand over money right away, but I'd hoped, even just a little, that they'd show concern, ask questions, do something to make me feel like their son. But no, they were too busy with Tyler as always. I nodded, forcing a weak smile. "Yeah, I understand. I'll figure it out." I stood, said goodbye, and left. As the door closed behind me, I felt a deeper crack form in my heart. Driving back to Boise, I didn't turn on the radio. I wanted to hear the wind, the tires on the road, and the sound of my heart breaking. I'd hoped, even just a little, that they'd care. But they didn't. I was still the one no one listened to. A few days later, I called Penelope. I thought maybe she'd be different. She was my sister, the one who shared bits of my childhood, however few. I told her the story about the illness, my voice weak, like I was pleading for help. Penelope sighed over the phone. "Jordan, I'd love to help, but I'm swamped with the kid and house renovations. I don't have $5,000. You'll figure it out, okay?" She added a few consoling words, but I knew they were empty. I hung up, feeling another piece of hope slip away. As for Tyler, I didn't even bother calling. I knew him. With his carefree lifestyle and endless debts, he'd never help me. I sat in my apartment, staring out the window. The city lights no longer sparkled. They were just dim specks, like my fading hope for my family. Then I thought of Grandma Eloise. She lived on a small farm 15 miles from my parents' house, where I'd spent the best summers of my life. I remembered sitting on her wooden porch, listening to her fairy tales while nibbling on her homemade butter cookies. She always made time for me, even when I was just a quiet kid. Once, when Penelope teased me for stuttering, Grandma pulled me into her arms and whispered, "Your voice is a gift, Jordan. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I picked up the phone, hesitating. I didn't want to deceive her, but I needed to know. I called, trying to sound casual. "Grandma, how are you?" She laughed, her voice shaky but warm. "Jordan, your call makes me so happy. How are you, my boy?" I took a breath and told her the story about the illness. "Grandma, I'm in trouble. I need $5,000 for treatment. I don't know what to do." She went quiet, but it wasn't the cold silence of my parents. I heard her take a deep breath, then she said, her voice full of worry, "Oh, Jordan, why didn't you tell me sooner? I don't have much, but I'll do everything to help you. Wait for me, okay? I'll find a way." I heard the clink of the phone being set down, then the faint sound of her rummaging, slowly, carefully, as if checking her meager savings. My heart tightened. Grandma, with her modest pension, was ready to give me everything, while my family, who had more, turned their backs. I hung up the phone, tears streaming down my cheeks. I wasn't crying because of the made-up story about the illness. I was crying for Grandma Eloise, the 82-year-old woman living in an old wooden house amidst cornfields, who gave me something my entire family never did: unconditional love. I sank onto the sofa in my small apartment. The city lights outside the window blurred through my tears. I thought about the long years when I was just a shadow in the Porter family, and how Grandma was the only light guiding me. 3 days later, I received a text from her. "Jordan, I'm coming to Boise this weekend. Are you free, my boy?" I smiled, though my heart was still heavy. I replied immediately, "Yes, I'm free. I'll pick you up when you arrive." I didn't ask why she was coming. I knew. She was bringing what she thought would save me, even though I didn't actually need it. But to her, it was everything she had. On Saturday morning, I stood at the Boise bus station where old buses from the countryside often pulled in. The sky was clear, but the wind was biting, making me pull my coat collar higher. When the silver-white bus rolled up, I saw Grandma step off, her back slightly hunched, her white hair neatly tied back. She wore the green sweater she'd knitted herself, carrying an old cloth bag filled with vegetables from her garden, tomatoes, zucchini, and a few dirt-covered potatoes. In her other hand was a small tin box, the faint smell of buttery baked goods wafting from it. I ran to her, hugging her tightly, feeling the familiar warmth and scent of her. Earth, grass, and a hint of lavender soap. "Jordan, you've gotten thinner," she said, looking at me with bright but worried eyes. "Are you eating enough? How's your illness?" I smiled, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm okay, Grandma. I'm figuring things out." I didn't want to lie anymore, but I couldn't tell the truth. Not yet. We went back to my apartment. She sat on the sofa, placing the bag of vegetables and the tin of cookies on the table. Then she pulled an old yellowed envelope from her coat pocket, secured with a rubber band. "Jordan, this is $3,500, she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "It's what I've saved up. It's not the full $5,000, but I'll find a way to get the rest. Take this for now, okay?" I looked at the envelope in her hands, her frail fingers trembling with age. I knew that money was everything she had. Savings scraped together from her meager pension, money set aside for rainy days when the roof leaked or the heater broke. I took her hand, feeling the warmth and the calluses from years of gardening. "Grandma," I choked, tears spilling before I could stop them. "I can't take your money. I'll be okay." She shook her head, pressing the envelope into my hand. "Jordan, you're my grandson. If I don't help you, what am I living for?" Her voice was gentle but firm, as if nothing in the world could stop her from doing this. I hugged her, crying like a child. We sat down, ate her cookies, and sipped tea. She told me about her garden, the stray cat that had just had kittens, and the sunny days at the farm. I told her about my voiceover work, the characters I brought to life. But then, like a river flowing back to its source, we started reminiscing about the old days. I brought up the summers at her farm, when I was the only kid who'd sit and listen to her stories. "Do you remember, Grandma, the story about the knight and the dragon who could love?" I asked, smiling. She laughed, her eyes sparkling. "Of course I remember, Jordan. You were the only one who didn't run off to play. You sat and listened. You even asked a grandma, if I were a knight, could I defeat the dragon?" She mimicked my childhood voice, making me laugh. "Do you remember what I told you?" I asked. She looked at me, her gaze soft. "I told you that you didn't need to defeat the dragon. You just needed to listen to your heart. And you did, Jordan. Your voice, it's special." I fell silent. Through all the years I felt invisible, she had heard me. Not the voice I used for work, but my true voice. My thoughts, my dreams, my sorrows. She was the only one who truly saw me, and now here she was, ready to give me everything she had. In that moment, I made a silent promise to myself. I would ensure Grandma lived her final years in happiness and comfort. I didn't want her worrying about a leaking roof or medical bills. I wanted her to live in a warm home with a new garden where she could plant flowers and tell stories to the neighborhood kids if she wanted. A week later, I contacted a real estate company. I found a house on the outskirts of Boise, not extravagant but spacious, with a small garden and large windows to let in the sunlight. It had 3 bedrooms, a cozy living room, and a porch overlooking a grassy field. I pictured her sitting there, sipping tea and watching the sunset. I didn't tell her anything, just quietly finalized the paperwork. When everything was ready, I drove to the farm and said, "Grandma, I want to invite you to live with me in Boise. I found a new place. It's beautiful. She was surprised, but her eyes lit up as I described the house. "Jordan, are you sure?" "I'm old. I don't want to be a burden." I took her hand, smiling. "You're never a burden. I want you with me." Finally, she nodded, and I saw a rare, joyful smile spread across her face. The day we moved into the new house, the sun shone brightly, golden light streaming through the windows. Grandma stepped inside, her old cloth bag in hand, looking around in awe. "Jordan, is this really your house?" she asked, her voice trembling. I nodded, leading her to the small garden where I'd already planted a patch of lavender, her favorite flower. She stood there, breathing in the scent, and I saw tears glisten in her eyes. "Thank you, Jordan," she whispered. I hugged her, feeling my heart whole for the first time in years. We cleaned, unpacked, and laughed like children. That evening, we sat on the porch, eating her homemade cookies and watching the fiery red sunset. I looked at her, the woman who had given me everything, and I knew that even if my family turned their backs, I had her, the one who was always there. In the days that followed, life with Grandma in the new house settled into a gentle rhythm. Each morning I woke to the smell of coffee she brewed and the soft hum of an old song she sang. She loved tending to the small garden, pruning the lavender bushes and planting a few tomato plants. I continued my voiceover work in a small studio I set up on the second floor, but now when I stepped out of the room, I no longer faced loneliness. Grandma was there with her kind smile and endless stories. We ate dinner together, watched old movies on TV, and sometimes just sat in silence, listening to the wind rustling through the grassy fields. It was a simple life, but to me, it was happiness. Yet even with Grandma by my side, the wounds from my family still lingered. Every time I thought of my parents, Penelope or Tyler, a sharp pain pierced me. Not out of anger, but disappointment. I had tested them, and their response was like a knife. I wasn't important enough for them to stop, to listen. The $52 million in the Silverline Trust remained a secret, but it was also a reminder that I could do more, not just for myself, but for others who, like me, had been forgotten. The idea of starting a charitable foundation came to me one afternoon while Grandma and I sat on the porch. She was telling me about an old neighbor in Twin Falls, an elderly woman living alone who couldn't afford to fix her roof when the rainy season hit. "She struggled so much, Jordan," Grandma said, her voice heavy with sadness. "No one helped, just because she had no family." I looked at her, and a spark ignited in my mind. I had money, a lot of money. I could help people like that woman, the poor, struggling students, lonely elders, and I'd do it without anyone knowing who I was. I contacted Mr. Kessler, my lawyer, and began making plans. I wanted the foundation to be anonymous, not tied to the name Jordan Porter. I named it Silverline Hope. I decided to start in Twin Falls, the town where I grew up, where beautiful memories mingled with pain. I wanted to do something for this town, not to prove myself, but to give people like me, the forgotten ones, a chance. Silverline Hope was born quietly. I worked with a team of experts Mr. Kessler recommended who helped turn the money into action. The first project was a scholarship program for underprivileged students in Twin Falls. I remembered my school days wearing Penelope's hand-me-down jackets because my parents wouldn't buy new ones. I didn't want other kids to go through that. We awarded scholarships to 50 students, covering tuition, books, and a small living stipend. I never met those kids, but I imagined the smiles on their faces, and it warmed my heart. Next, I funded the construction of a small library in the town center. Twin Falls had never had a proper library, just an old reading room with worn-out books. I wanted kids to have a place to dream, to read fairy tales like the ones Grandma told me. When the project began, I received emails from the foundation's management team, including photos of the library's framework going up. I sat in my room looking at the pictures, feeling a strange, unfamiliar joy, the joy of giving without expecting anything in return. The third project was a community health clinic. I thought back to my fabricated story about an illness And though it was a lie, I knew many in Twin Falls couldn't afford doctor visits. The clinic would provide free health care for the poor and elderly. As I approved the plans, I pictured Grandma with her modest pension, never having to worry about medical bills again. I didn't tell her about the foundation, but I knew she'd be proud if she knew. While Silverline Hope quietly took shape, Grandma and I lived peaceful days in our house on the outskirts of Boise. She loved cooking simple meals, pumpkin soup, toasted bread, and sometimes a dish of stew she called Grandma's Special. I loved watching her bustle in the kitchen, softly singing, as if time couldn't touch her. But whenever she asked about my family, I'd smile and change the subject. I didn't want her to know about the $5,000 test, didn't want her to be hurt by her own children and grandchildren. The resentment in my heart slowly faded, but the wound remained. I no longer hated my parents, Penelope or Tyler, but I couldn't forget how they'd turned their backs. Every time I thought of them, I saw myself standing in the Twin Falls house trying to speak while no one listened. But now, I had a greater purpose. Silverline Hope was my way of turning pain into action, loneliness into hope for others. And Grandma, the woman sitting beside me every evening, was why I kept going. One afternoon, as I reviewed reports from the Foundation's team, Grandma walked in carrying a tray of butter cookies. "Jordan, you're working too hard," she said, setting the tray on the table. "Take a break, eat some cookies with me." I laughed, closed my laptop, and sat beside her. "Grandma, do you think doing good makes us happier?" I asked. She looked at me, her eyes twinkling. "Happiness doesn't come from what you do, but from your heart. If you act out of love, you're already happy." A few weeks later, I received an email from the Twin Falls local government inviting me to the opening ceremony of the Community Health Clinic, the largest project of the Silverline Hope Foundation so far. They didn't know I was the primary donor, only that I was a former resident of the town. I hesitated, unsure if I wanted to return to a place filled with such bittersweet memories. But then I looked at Grandma, watering the lavender bushes in the garden, and I knew I had to go. Not just for the clinic, but because I wanted her to see that I had done something meaningful, even if she didn't know the full truth. "Grandma, I'm going back to Twin Falls this weekend," I told her over dinner. "There's an opening ceremony for a new health clinic. Will you come with me?" She looked surprised, then smiled. "A health clinic? That's wonderful, Jordan. I'll go. Let's see how the town's doing." I nodded, trying to hide my nervousness. I didn't know if my family would be there, but the thought of facing them made my heart race. On the day of the ceremony, the Twin Falls sky was clear, with golden sunlight streaming over the grassy fields. The new clinic stood on the outskirts of town, a modest but modern building with white walls and large windows. A crowd gathered in the front yard, locals, officials, and a few reporters from the local paper. Grandma and I arrived early, sitting in the back row. She wore her favorite green knitted sweater, her hand clasped in mine, her eyes sparkling as she looked at the building. "It's beautiful, Jordan," she whispered. "Who funded something so generous?" I smiled, saying only, "Just a kind person, Grandma." Then I saw them, my parents, Penelope and Tyler, entering the ceremony area. My heart stopped. They didn't know I was here, and I hadn't told them I was coming. Dad, with his sturdy gait, wore his familiar plaid shirt. Mom, with her carefully curled hair, was talking to Penelope. My sister pushed a stroller, looking tired but polished. Tyler, with his messy hair and wrinkled t-shirt, was scrolling through his phone, oblivious to his surroundings. They sat a few rows ahead, unaware of me and Grandma. The ceremony began with a speech from the mayor, thanking the anonymous donor and emphasizing the clinic's importance. I listened, but my mind wandered. I thought back to that evening at my parents' house when I asked for $5,000 and was turned away. The pain still lingered like an unhealed scar. I glanced at Grandma clapping softly and felt a small comfort. But then, Penelope turned around and spotted me. She whispered something to Mom, and the whole family looked my way. Tyler smirked, as if he'd just seen something amusing. After the mayor's speech, Penelope stood and approached me and Grandma. "Jordan, why didn't you tell us you were coming?" she asked, her tone half surprised, half sarcastic. Before I could respond, Tyler cut in. "Still doing that oddball stuff? Voicing cartoons?" He laughed loudly as if it were the funniest thing in the world. Dad looked at me, saying nothing, but his eyes were full of judgment. Mom gave a strained smile, saying, "You came to visit without calling. You surprised me." Grandma greeted them softly, her voice trembling, but no one responded. No one asked how I was, no one cared. I just nodded, holding Grandma's hand tightly, trying to stay calm. Then the moment came. The MC, a cheerful middle-aged woman, stepped up to the podium. "And now, we invite the primary donor of this health clinic to speak. Please give a round of applause." The crowd clapped, looking around curiously. I took a deep breath and stood. Grandma looked at me, surprised. "Jordan, where are you going?" she whispered. I smiled, squeezing her hand. "I'll be right back, Grandma." I walked to the podium, feeling dozens of eyes on me. The air seemed to freeze. I saw my parents' stunned faces, Penelope's jaw drop, and Tyler lower his phone, eyes wide. I stood at the microphone, my heart pounding, but my voice was steady. "Thank you for being here today," I said, looking out at the crowd but letting my gaze linger on my family. "I once asked for $5,000 to survive. Today I'm giving $5 million so this town can thrive." The room erupted in applause. Strangers stood cheering, but my family sat frozen like statues. Dad bowed his head, Mom covered her mouth, Penelope shook her head in disbelief, and Tyler stared as if I were a complete stranger. I looked at Grandma. Her eyes were teary, but not with sadness. It was the look of pride, the look of someone who had always believed in me. I stepped down from the podium, returning to her side, not glancing at my family again. She took my hand, whispering, "Jordan, you've made me so proud." As the ceremony ended, I helped Grandma to the parking lot. She smiled at everyone while I tried to avoid the curious stares directed at me. "Jordan, you didn't tell me you funded this," she said as we got into the car, her voice soft but tinged with concern. I smiled, hands on the steering wheel. "I wanted to do it quietly, Grandma. I didn't need anyone to know." She nodded, letting out a small sigh. "I understand, but secrets sometimes are scarier than poverty." Before I could start the car, my phone rang. It was Dad. I hesitated for a few seconds before answering. "Where are you?" His voice was cold. "I'm about to take Grandma back to Boise." "No need. Come back to the house now. Your mom and Penelope are here. We need to talk." I glanced at Grandma. She nodded silently as if she knew I couldn't avoid this conversation. I turned the car around, driving toward the old house in Twin Falls. The sun had fully set, leaving only a faint orange glow on the horizon. The closer we got, the tighter my stomach knotted. My parents' house looked exactly as it did when I left. Neatly trimmed lawn, white-painted porch. But the yellow light spilling from the windows made it feel like it was watching me, judging, cold. When Grandma and I walked in, everyone was already waiting. Dad sat in his armchair, his face stern. Mom sat nearby, her hands clasped tightly. Penelope leaned against the wall and Tyler sprawled on the sofa, phone in hand. No one smiled, no one greeted us. The air in the room felt thick, heavy. I stood still, looking at the familiar yet distant faces, and knew this moment would change everything. "Jordan, sit down," Dad said, his voice low but sharp. I sat, feeling like I was walking into a courtroom. "You owe us an explanation," he continued. "That health clinic, $5 million. Where did you get that money?" I took a deep breath, knowing I couldn't hide anymore. "I won the lottery," I said, my voice calm. "Powerball, $85 million. After taxes, about $52 million. I set up a trust and I used some of it for things like the clinic." Silence. A heavy, suffocating silence, as if the room had been drained of air. Mom spoke first, her voice trembling. $52 million? Jordan, why didn't you tell your family? But before I could answer, Tyler sat up, his eyes gleaming. Are you serious? 52 million? Man, you're loaded. Penelope looked at me, her surprise replaced by something colder, calculation. Then it began. Dad spoke first, his tone softening, almost friendly. Jordan, you know I've always wanted to expand the business. A new garage, maybe a chain of repair shops. We could invest together. You've got the money, I've got the experience. I looked at him, saying nothing, just nodding slightly. Penelope jumped in, her voice sweet but calculated. Jordan, I'm planning to open a fashion boutique. Just a few $100,000 and I'll pay you back. You'll help me, right? I looked at her, giving a faint smile. Tyler predictably laughed loudly. Bro, let me borrow a fancy car. A BMW or something, just to drive for a few months. He spoke as if I were a bank with no interest. I sat there listening, but a coldness settled in my heart. They didn't ask how I was, what I'd done with the money, or why I kept it a secret. They only saw the $52 million, not me. Jordan, the son, the brother they'd always overlooked. No, I said, my voice cold but clear. I'm not investing with anyone, not lending a car, and not giving money to anyone. The room froze. Dad slammed his hand on the table, his face red. Jordan, are you that selfish? We're your family. Mom looked at me, her eyes teary, but I knew it wasn't out of care for me. You can't turn your back on family like this, Jordan. We raised you. Penelope shook her head, muttering something to Tyler, and I caught the word ungrateful. Tyler just shrugged, but his eyes burned with resentment. I looked at Grandma, worried she might waver, but she, small yet steadfast, gripped my hand tighter. Jordan's done the right thing, she said, her voice slow but firm. He has the right to decide his own life. Don't pressure him. My parents were stunned, not expecting Grandma to take my side. Penelope and Tyler glared at her as if she'd betrayed them. The meeting ended in tension. I stood helping Grandma out, not looking back. But I knew they wouldn't let it go. A few days later, I heard my parents were bad-mouthing me to relatives, saying I was rich but stingy, that I'd turned my back on family. Penelope and Tyler were worse. They took to social media, posting veiled comments calling me selfish and ungrateful. One of Tyler's posts read, "Some people win 52 million and won't share a dime with their own brother." I read those words, my heart aching, but I didn't respond. I didn't want to get dragged into that fight. Instead, I returned to the house in Boise where Grandma was waiting. We sat on the porch, sipping tea and watching the city lights twinkle. "Don't let them make you sad, Jordan," she said, stroking my hair like when I was a child. "You have a good heart, and that's what matters most." I smiled, feeling her warmth. Even if the world turned its back on me, I had her, and I had Silverline hope, where I could keep doing what was right. 6 months passed, and life with Grandma in Boise flowed as peacefully as a slow-moving river. I continued my voiceover work, spending each day in front of the microphone, breathing life into characters I'd never meet. The Silverline Hope Foundation grew steadily, with more scholarships awarded, the Twin Falls Library opening its doors, and the health clinic saving dozens of lives. I stayed out of the public eye, accepting no thanks, but each report from the foundation's team was a small spark, reminding me I was doing something meaningful. But while I was building a better world, my family in Twin Falls was falling apart. I heard from an old friend that Tyler, my younger brother, had spiraled into debt. With his reckless lifestyle, he'd borrowed from the wrong people, and now those debts were dragging our parents down with him. I wasn't surprised. Tyler had always been an uncontrollable whirlwind, and my parents were always ready to shield him no matter the consequences. But I hadn't expected their indifference and their greed after learning about my money to push things to the brink. One evening, as I was having dinner with Grandma, my phone buzzed. It was Penelope. Her voice trembled through the speaker, lacking its usual sharpness. "Jordan, Dad had a heart attack. He's in Twin Falls Hospital. It's not good." My blood ran cold. Despite Dad's rejection, despite calling me selfish, he was still my father. Without thinking, I said, "I'm coming right now." I drove to Twin Falls in the dark, the road lit only by my headlights. Memories flooded back. Dad teaching me to fix cars in the garage, his voice stern but sometimes patient. Him watching football, letting me sit beside him, though he never asked which team I liked. I'd once wanted to make him proud, but he never saw me. Now, with him in the hospital, I didn't know if I was rushing there out of familial love or an inescapable sense of duty. The Twin Falls Hospital glowed brightly in the night, the smell of antiseptic and the hum of machines making me uneasy. I found Mom, Penelope, and Tyler in the waiting room. Mom hugged me, tears streaming down her face, but I felt no warmth. "Jordan, thank you for coming," she whispered. Penelope grabbed my hand, her eyes filled with worry and a hint of calculation. Tyler just nodded, looking more worn out than ever, like he'd been through a battle. "How's Dad?" I asked. Penelope's voice broke as she answered, "The doctor said it was a heart attack from stress. They're working on him, but the costs are high, Jordan." I knew what she was implying. They thought I, with my $52 million, would easily open my wallet. But I said nothing, just nodded and went to find the doctor. He was a middle-aged man with a weary face, explaining that Dad needed immediate surgery with costs running into tens of thousands. I didn't hesitate. "I'll cover everything," I said, but added a condition. "Please keep my name out of it. Don't tell my family." I contacted Mr. Kessler, my lawyer, to arrange payment through the Silverline Trust completely anonymously. I didn't want them to know, didn't want them to feel indebted to me, or worse, think I was doing this to prove something. I did it because despite the pain they'd caused me, I couldn't let my father die without doing something. Over the next few days, I stayed in Twin Falls, sleeping on a sofa in the hospital waiting room, quietly monitoring Dad's condition. Mom, Penelope, and Tyler didn't know I'd paid, and they didn't ask. They were too busy worrying, arguing about Tyler's debts, about who would cover the hospital bills. I overheard them, Tyler blaming Dad for pressuring him to pay off debts, Mom lamenting about money, and I stayed silent. I didn't want to argue, didn't want to remind them of what had happened. After a week, Dad recovered. The doctor came out and told the family, "He's stable now. If someone hadn't covered the costs in time, he wouldn't have made it." Mom looked around, confused. "Who paid?" "We don't have the money yet." The doctor just smiled, saying it was an anonymous benefactor. I stood there watching them but said nothing. I left the hospital soon after, returning to Boise to Grandma. When I got home, Grandma asked about Dad's health, and I told her about his hospitalization. "I paid all the hospital bills, Grandma. I didn't want them to know. As long as Dad's okay, that's enough." She was quiet for a long moment, her hand gently squeezing mine. "You always think of others, Jordan. But some things people need to know so they can feel regret." A few days later, as I sat with Grandma on the porch, she got a call from Mom. I couldn't hear their conversation, but when she hung up, she looked at me, her eyes gentle but resolute. "Jordan, I told your mom. I told her you paid for your dad's hospital bills." I was stunned. "Grandma, why?" "I didn't want them to know." She took my hand, her voice slow. "Jordan, they need to know how good you are. They need to know how big your heart is, even if they don't deserve it." I didn't know how to feel. Part of me was upset with Grandma for revealing the truth, but another part felt relieved. The truth was out, not through my words, but through her love. I hugged her, feeling her familiar warmth, and knew that whether my family changed or not, I had her. The one who always saw me, always loved me for no reason other than being me. Few weeks after the hospital incident, I received a call from Mom. Her voice over the phone lacked the cold judgment it once carried. Instead, she spoke slowly, almost hesitantly. "Jordan, can you meet with me and Dad? The whole family wants to talk to you." I went silent, gripping the phone tightly. Part of me wanted to refuse, to keep a safe distance from old wounds. But then I looked at Grandma, watering the lavender bushes in the garden, and remembered her words. Happiness comes from your heart. I took a deep breath and replied, Yes, Mom. I'd like to invite everyone to Boise. This weekend, okay? I didn't know what to expect from this meeting. An apology? A change? Or just another encounter with disappointment? I decided to invite them to my and Grandma's home, not to show off, but to let them see the life I'd chosen. Simple, peaceful, and filled with love. I wanted them to understand that money didn't define me, but moments like these did. Sitting with Grandma, listening to her stories, and feeling the presence of true family. On the day they arrived, Grandma and I prepared a simple dinner. She made her special stew while I baked some bread and tossed a salad with vegetables from the garden. The house was filled with the warm aroma of food, and soft golden light glowed from the dining table. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my shirt, feeling the nervous anticipation of a boy facing his parents after doing something wrong. But this time, I wasn't wrong. I was just being myself. When the doorbell rang, my heart pounded. I opened the door to find Dad, Mom, Penelope, and Tyler standing there. Dad looked older, his hair streaked with gray, his face still marked by exhaustion from the heart attack. Mom wore a simple sweater, no longer the picture of perfection. Penelope pushed a stroller, her young child fast asleep. Tyler, for the first time, wasn't holding his phone, just standing there, his eyes avoiding mine. "Come in," I said, my voice calm but my heart racing. Grandma greeted them, hugging each one as if nothing had ever happened. "Come on in, everyone," she said warmly. "I made stew. Sit down and eat with me." They stepped inside, looking around the house. I saw Mom pause by the lavender bushes outside the window, her eyes softening. "It's beautiful, Jordan," she whispered. Dad nodded but said nothing, taking a seat at the table. Dinner began in silence. The clink of spoons against bowls, the soft sound of chewing, and the whistle of wind through the grassy fields were all I could hear. I looked at them. My family. The ones who had turned their backs on me, who had made me feel invisible. Now they were here in my home, and I didn't know where to begin. Finally, Dad spoke, his voice hoarse. "Jordan, I'm sorry. I didn't know what you did for me, for the town. I was wrong to call you selfish." He bowed his head, hands gripping the edge of the table. Mom placed a hand on his shoulder, her eyes teary. "I'm sorry too, Jordan. I didn't realize how much you were hurting. I just wanted our family to be okay." Penelope looked at me, her voice trembling. "I haven't been good to you, Jordan. I was too caught up in my own life to remember you're my brother." Tyler, for the first time, didn't joke or mock. "Jordan, I'm sorry. I've been a lousy brother, but thank you for saving Dad." I sat there listening, feeling a wall in my heart slowly crumbling. I didn't know if their apologies were genuine or sparked by the knowledge that I'd paid Dad's hospital bills, and that I had millions at my disposal. But looking into their eyes, I saw a flicker of sincerity. Not perfect, but enough to make me want to believe. "Thank you," I said softly. "I don't want to hold grudges. I just want us to be a family." Grandma squeezed my hand under the table as if to say she was proud of me. Dinner continued, the tension easing, though moments of silence lingered. We talked about small things: the weather, Penelope's job, Dad's health. No one mentioned money or the Silverline Hope Foundation. And I knew, though it was a fragile start, this was the first dinner in years where we sat together without resentment, only quiet tears. As they left, Mom hugged me longer than usual, and Dad placed a hand on my shoulder, his eyes free of judgment. Penelope promised to call more often, and Tyler, before getting into the car, looked at me and said, "Jordan, I'll try to be a better person." I nodded, making no promises, but feeling a small spark of hope in my heart. I went back inside, finding Grandma washing dishes. "You did well, Jordan," she said, smiling. I hugged her from behind, feeling the warmth of the woman who had taught me about love and forgiveness. That night, I stood on the porch watching Boise's lights twinkle, and for the first time in years, my heart felt lighter. My family wasn't perfect, and we'd likely need time to heal. My story doesn't end with the $52 million, though that money changed my life. It's not about the times my family turned their backs on me or the wounds I carried from childhood. My story is about the journey to rediscover myself, to learn how to love and forgive, and to realize that a person's worth lies not in what they possess but in what they choose to do with their life. When I won the lottery, I thought money would fill the void in my heart. I believed it would make my family see me, love me, and that I'd no longer be Jordan Porter, the one no one listened to. But I was wrong. Money didn't bring love, nor did it erase scars. It was just a tool, and how I used it shaped who I am today. The Silverline Hope Foundation, with its scholarships, library, and health clinic, wasn't just a way to help others, it was a way to heal myself. Every student who received a scholarship, every elderly person cared for at the clinic, was a piece of the puzzle that made me feel my life had meaning. But the greatest lesson I learned didn't come from the money. It came from Grandma Eloise. She taught me that true love doesn't need conditions, recognition, or fame. When she offered me her entire savings of $3,500, I understood that love isn't measured by material value but by the willingness to sacrifice. She was the light that guided me through my darkest days, and through her I learned to forgive, not just my family but myself. My family isn't perfect. My parents, Penelope and Tyler, hurt me deeply. When I pretended to need $5,000, they turned away, and when they learned about my $52 million, their attitudes changed. But when Dad was in the hospital and when they sat in my Boise home apologizing and admitting their mistakes, I realized that forgiveness isn't about erasing the past. It's about allowing yourself to move forward. I didn't forgive to make them feel better, but to set myself free from resentment, pain, and the loneliness that once held me captive. If I could offer one piece of advice to you reading this story, it would be this. Listen to your heart, as Grandma told me. Don't wait for others to validate your worth, because sometimes even those closest to you won't see you. Find the people who truly love you like Grandma did for me and cherish them. Do good not for praise, but because it makes life worth living. And if you carry wounds, don't be afraid to face them. Forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the greatest strength you can have. I still live in Boise, in the suburban house with the lavender garden. Grandma still makes butter cookies and tells me fairy tales, though she often falls asleep mid-story now. The Silverline Hope Foundation continues to grow, bringing hope to people I'll never meet. My family visits occasionally, and though things aren't what they once were, we're learning to be a family, one step at a time. Each night I stand on the porch watching Boise's lights twinkle. But now, they're no longer a symbol of loneliness. They're a reminder that I've found my voice, not just in the microphone, but in the things I do, the love I give, and the heart I carry. And if you're feeling invisible, know this: you're not alone. Listen to your heart, and you'll find your own light.